Pittsburgh Steelers making multiple moves on Tuesday, re-signing Larry Ogunjobi, re-signing Damontae Kazee, and adding a new lineman in Nate Herbig. All of that explained and more right here on today's Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, joined today by Josh Taylor of 93.7 The Fan and KDKA TV. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting app and especially on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. But thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. Now, you may be wondering, where's Josh Taylor? You said he was on the show. He's coming. Whole thing is, we recorded this show way too early, and it was nothing we could do about it. I'm here in Dayton, Ohio, covering Pitt basketball. They play at 9:10 p.m. Tuesday night. I was trying to get the show done. I waited as long as I could. And then, of course, the Steelers then made a third move. We were going to talk about Damontae Kazee in the secondary. We talked about Nate Herbig in the offensive line. And then they signed Larry Ogunjobi for the defensive line. And reportedly, according to Adam Schefter, that's a 3-year deal for $28.75 million, $21.75 million to come in the first 2 years. Little under at the $10 million range that I thought that he might want to get, but I think that's a big add for the Steelers. We're going to get to the main point there, but just wanted to let you guys know this episode is going to be edited up a little bit. We're going to talk about the secondary, the idea of bringing back Damontae Kazee a little bit in that, and how that pairs with the addition of Patrick Peterson and already Minkah Fitzpatrick, and a group that led the NFL in interceptions just last year. What does this mean for the defense? I think that there's some sign there. But I want to give you some thoughts on Larry Ogunjobi before we get to that, because I do think that Larry Ogunjobi is a guy, when he was healthy last year, he paired very well with Cam Hayward. They helped stuff the run. He got after the quarterback. And now that he'll have a full offseason where he's not just rehabbing off of the injury that made him lose his contract with the Bears before he signed with the Steelers, there's a good chance that he could come in and even be healthier. And that could be a good long situation for the next few years, where the Steelers have 2 solidified veterans on the defensive line. It also makes interior defensive line, not as pressing of a need in the first round of the Steelers NFL draft plans. So all that being said, here's my conversation with Josh Taylor about the impact of bringing back Damontae Kazee and how it pairs with the talent that the Steelers are aligning in their secondary, because I think this is a tonal shift of what the Steelers are trying to do to be part of the next generation of what NFL defenses are going to have to be if they want to hang with the Patrick Mahomeses, the Josh Allenses, and the Joe Burrows of the world in the NFL. Here's more from that clip when we were talking earlier today. We've been talking a lot about the defense and how that's going to be a focus for the team. But I think the traditional thought of how the Steelers defense has been applied over the last 2 decades is they wanted to stuff the run, get after the quarterback, and have guys in the secondary who may not necessarily be turnover machines, but they keep the guys in front of them and they just limit the big plays. It seems now, with the signing of Patrick Peterson, and the agreement to sign Patrick Peterson that they made on Monday, and then the agreement to sign Damontae Kazee, re-sign Damontae Kazee back to the defense, those are both guys that specialize in their ball skills. And with Minkah Fitzpatrick, this looks like a group that maybe Mike Tomlin and Omar are styling towards. You know what? Yes, still stuff the run, still get after the quarterback. But you need talented guys in the secondary who will attack the football. The Steelers led the NFL in interceptions last year, and that was with T.J. Watt missing half the season. Is this a changing of the guard? Is this something that's been coming, and we're just starting to see it come to fruition more now? What is your insight on the move, one, to re-sign Kazee and kind of keep another key member of the secondary from last year? Josh, you're muted.
I muted myself there. The one thing I thought about coming into the offseason, especially after I heard that Cam Sutton had signed with Detroit, my thought process was, okay, if they're willing to let Cam Sutton go, who are they trying to bring back? And my first response was, I hope one of the guys they bring back is Damontae Kazee. That was my first thought in my mind. It's like, if they're not bringing Cam Sutton back, I hope they're bringing back Damontae Kazee. And then we find out a day later, lo and behold, they brought back Damontae Kazee. So I'm sitting there in the back of my mind going, okay, so what's the next domino after Cam Sutton leaves? Not thinking in between those two moves that signing Patrick Peterson would happen in the middle. So then you sign Patrick Peterson and you bring back Damontae Kazee. So my first response is, wait a minute. Guy who was tied for second in the league in interceptions last year, guy who's led the league in interceptions before, and also could stop the run with this team. I see where they're going with this now. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how the emphasis on defense has shifted. There are people that will tell you that defense doesn't matter as long as you have the quarterback. Well, here's the counter to that. Because how many shootouts can you get in where your quarterback doesn't make the first mistake? Mm-hmm. Especially if you're in a shootout with a Justin Herbert or a Joe Burrow or a Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen, how much do you really like your team's chances? How many teams get in the shootouts with Patrick Mahomes and survive, Chris?
Right.
Not many.
Not many. No.
So you can't sit there and expect to, okay, well, we'll just get in shootouts all day and expect to win. That doesn't work for everybody. So there has to be some emphasis on, hey, if you can't win shootouts all day, at least help your defense be better prepared to at least lessen or soften that blow. Because at this point, it's hard to expect defenses just be dominant and just be locked down and shutting people out and holding folks to 16 points a game like they did in 2008. It's hard to expect that to happen. However, what isn't hard to expect to happen, can you limit teams to between 20 and 23 points a game? Can you get a couple extra turnovers? Can you win the turnover battle? Can you at least stop the run and force teams to become one-dimensional and make it harder for them to move the ball and score points? And more importantly, can you do that after you get a lead and be able to preserve a lead, not only with your offense being able to wear teams down, but can your defense be able to preserve leads by being more aggressive? All of that stuff comes into play now. But if you can force turnovers and be able to get an opportunistic play here and there, like say week 1 of Cincinnati last season, that was something no one saw coming. But if you can find a day like that where your defense is just opportunistic and you're getting 5 turnovers, granted, it shouldn't have been as close as it was, but you still escaped with a win there. It helps you really reinforce what could work for you. Now, I'm going to say this again, and I've talked about this a lot because I talked about this previously. But now we're looking at the past 2 seasons. They've won 9 games in each of the last 2 seasons, right, Chris?
Mm-hmm.
That means 18 regular season wins over the last 2 seasons. In all 18 of those wins, Chris, they had an even or positive turnover margin and gave up 20 points or less.
Wow.
This is becoming a formula that works for this team. The only thing literally missing is an offense that can be efficient enough to get you enough points to where your defense doesn't have to be the sole reason why you're winning games. Or your running game doesn't have to be the sole reason why you're winning games because your defense is keeping the other team quiet. Now you're getting to the point where it doesn't have to be the thing that helps you win, but it becomes the foundation of what allows you to become a better team. Because if it's already in place on the defensive side where you say, okay, we can be a defense that allows 21, 22 points or less on average and allows our offense to, even if they're not at their best, still have enough in the win games. If they can score 24 or 25 and still get us over the hump, that gets us past the days when they're not able to score 28 or 29. So it's not necessarily about being something that's the thing you rely on anymore. Now it becomes the bedrock. It becomes a thing. Okay, now you have this here, and let's see how aggressive you can get with your offense to help your offense complement your defense better. Because once again, Chris, complementary football tends to be the thing that wins games for you, regardless of how many points you score, regardless of who your opponent is, or regardless if you're in regulation or in overtime. If you can play complementary football to get you over the hump on when you're not playing your best game, having your defense that can be opportunistic. If they can't be dominant, if they can't be shut down, can you be fast? Can you be athletic? And can you be opportunistic?
Right.
Now we're moving in that direction.
Yeah, I think that's definitely where the direction is headed. And it makes sense. It's just the changing of the NFL. And this is part of what you and I have talked about a lot with cyclical NFL changes, and that teams always adapt to different things. And you know what? The NFL rules have been adapting for a long time, because the way that we're talking about before, the Steelers found the formula to win that way. That was the 2000s. They were able to stuff the run. They got after the quarterback. They had decent guys in the secondary, and they had Troy Polamalu, who was pretty doggone good. But they weren't ball hawking guys. They were more so guys that were physical. They tackled really well. And if there was a pass that came their way because that was a little errant, they were able to make a play on that. And that was often sparked by the pressure that was getting there. Because of the pace of the NFL, the rules against the defense that protect the offense more and more and more, it is that much easier for offenses to just be able to just throw the ball at will, and to be able to act and to not give the defensive front the chance to set the tone. And the Steelers defensive front is still huge for what they do. And I think that's still one of the biggest parts of football, is being able to beat up the opposing offensive line, make a quarterback uncomfortable. Heck, it might have won the Chiefs the Super Bowl with the touchdown that they scored, forcing Jalen Hurts to fumble in the middle of that game. But I think that a big part of this too is not just having guys who can break up passes, but guys who can create those turnovers in those big moments. And like you said, you can't just manifest turnovers all the time. There's too many factors that play into things. You can dial up things that you think will create opportunities, like Minkah Fitzpatrick's pick 6 on Joe Burrow at the start of the season. That was something that he planned out. But sometimes quarterbacks, they'll see their way through that kind of stuff and they'll work around it. But what you can do is you can get a lot of talented guys who can attack the football and create those opportunities, and who have a higher percentage of creating those opportunities that get you those turnovers, then get your offense more chances to set the tone in games. I agree with you. This is definitely the tone that the Steelers are approaching right now and that they're striking. But I still think this team needs a young cornerback to come with this group in the NFL draft. This is a talented NFL draft class at cornerback, whether it's first, second, maybe even third round. Get somebody young who can learn with this crew, because now you still have Kazee, you still have Fitzpatrick, you still have Peterson, and you still have guys like maybe Witherspoon and Wallace. And even if you bring back James Pierre, that's still a group that you can mold, that can help mold a younger guy who can become a star for you in the future, or just another solidified starter who maybe has some ball skills. But we got to talk about Nate Herbig as well, the other Steelers offensive signing, on Tuesday. Nate Herbig, a big offensive lineman coming by way of the Jets and originally of the Eagles. What does that mean for the Steelers offense? We'll find out in just a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. So don't go anywhere. But first, we'd love to tell you about our great sponsors, and that, of course, is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you haven't tried FanDuel yet, well, this is your chance, because the FanDuel is having a great offer for you to bet on NBA games right now, called the No Sweat First Bet, that gives you up to $1,000 in bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app today, and it's safe, secure, and super easy to use. And then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to threes drained. FanDuel lets you make player prop bets and gives you so many options. Plus, FanDuel lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with same-game parlays. So don't miss out on the chance to get your No Sweat First Bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Hey everyone, Chris Carter here again, just getting you back into the show here. Because please take note that some of these clips where I'm talking with Josh Taylor, we didn't know about the Larry Ogunjobi signing yet because we had to record earlier in the day. So please note that if there's a mention of a defensive lineman, need or something like that, and it seems like we forget, it's not that we forgot, it hadn't happened yet when we were recording. So please take note of that. But I wanted to switch the conversation to talk about Nate Herbig in the Steelers offensive line, because Nate Herbig was signed to a 2-year deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers, formerly of the Jets and then of the Eagles. Here's my conversation with Josh on that topic. But Nate Herbig, a guy who they are reported to be signing, both of these guys to 2-year deals, according to Jerry Dulac of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, by the way. This seems like an interesting move. His nickname was Nasty Nate. He played for 1 year for the Jets after playing some years for the Philadelphia Eagles. He's very much an Andy Weidl guy, big, physical, 6'4", 330-some pounds. Looks like he could get to the second level, loves to hit, loves to run block, could definitely improve in the pass blocking realm there. But he seems to fit that physical mold that the Steelers want to be evil up front. They want to be the team that dominates the offensive line of scrimmage and create space for Najee Harris and Jalen Warren to run more. And if anything, I don't think Herbig is necessarily a guarantee to be the starter right away. I think that I do think he's going to be competition for Kevin Dotson. If Kevin Dotson does not come correct in training camp, this spot could belong to Herbig. Kevin Dotson went out over Kendrick Green, who didn't even play this season when they were battling out in training camp. But I think this competition is going to be a little bit stiffer Josh, what's your take on getting Herbig and what it does mean for the Steelers? Does he automatically become a starter in your eyes, over a Kevin Dotson?
My first response is thank you, Andy Weidl. Thank you. This is what I was telling people. I said, look, if you need something to feel optimistic about, go look at what's happening in Philadelphia when they were on that run to get to the Super Bowl. Go look at what this offensive line is doing. Remember, during the season, there was no defense in the league better than San Francisco. And Philadelphia pushed San Francisco around. Yeah. It wasn't like, oh, they made a play here and there. No. Philly had the mindset going in to be more physical at the point of attack, and they were, and it was obvious, and everybody knew by the end of the game, Philly came here to punch San Francisco in the mouth, and they did it. And they did that all season long. Not ironically, San Francisco's offensive line did the same thing, punch people in the mouth all season long. It should not shock you that when Andy Weidl was in Philadelphia and previously in Baltimore, guess what both of those offensive lines did during his tenure? They punched you in the mouth all day long. So it should not shock anybody that one of the first moves they make is they reunite Andy Weidl with the guy that he had previously had under his tenure in Philadelphia, who is a big, whopping hog molly of a human that's going to try to hit other guys in the mouth. That's exactly what you need, especially with a run offense that showed exactly what it needed to be over the second half of the season. 7 of their last 9 games. And Chris, what was the thing I had been begging for since that first Cleveland game last year? I kept begging for it. Just run the ball. I don't care where. I don't care with whom. Just run the ball. And the thing we saw after the second half, we saw this offensive line come together. And I'll point this out again. You were the guy that asked Mike Tomlin the question about what was different with the offensive line after the bye week. And he talked about how they were starting to really come together and have more chemistry in the run game. And then you saw it against the Saints. It just went all the way from there. I remember there were 2 things I noticed in that first drive against the Saints. I said, wait a minute, the offensive line is getting a push. And the second thing was they were running out of the pistol. And I was ready to squeal when I saw that. But the thing that was more important to me was the offensive line being that much more cohesive, getting a push and being more physical. And then you saw it in that Carolina game. You saw it in that Atlanta game. You saw it in the season finale against Cleveland, how this team was just physical up front, and you wanted to see them rise to the occasion. Now you're bringing in another guy that fits what you want this offensive line to do. It just seems like it's the perfect progression that you want for this offense. But I've been talking about this the past few weeks, Chris, on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. I've been asking. I said, look, if for no other reason, I would like to see this team add to the offensive line at the very least to add depth. At the most, if you could provide another quality starter that gets inserted somewhere that might be able to unseat somebody else. And that seems like it makes perfect sense at left guard if you're going to put him in. At the very least, create competition with Kevin Dotson, or at the most, maybe slot him in as a starter next to Dan Moore and next to Mason Cole. I'll tell you now, if I had to pick between the two, I'll take him over Mason Cole. I'll take him over Kevin Dotson right now. You start him at left guard, and I want to see what this run game does. But there's something else that we talked about, and there's something that I thought was important if we're talking about this offense long term, as far as investing in Kenny Pickett. You can't just invest in the quarterback. You can't just invest in the skill guys. You got to invest in the offensive line too. You got to invest in the guys that protect him, because I'm going to point this out again. Twice last season, someone on your line missed a blitzing linebacker and your quarterback ended up concussed. You can't keep letting that happen. So you have to put better assets in place and better resources in place to protect your quarterback. Now you have that too. I see nothing but, at least at the very least, an improved quality of play from the collective, whether it's just added depth or a better starting 5. I am okay with that, because that's what you want. And here's another thing to think about. We're talking about the offensive line. That whole starting 5 played together last year. And most offensive line coaches will tell you, you need to be prepared, because it doesn't happen all the time. You're going to lose a guy or two. So at the very least, now you have a plan in place to where, hey, if we lose a guy, at the very least, we got another guy that can step in that's ready to go. So you're adding depth there. I'd love to see them add another one in the draft for no other reason, just to add depth on the offensive line, because you're going to lose guys during the course of the season. Last year is an aberration. You don't get 5 guys playing 17 games together most years. And
right.
Mathematically, I don't expect it. If it happens again, I'll be happy to be wrong. I'm not expecting it. So this is why this signing is so important, because at the very least, it gives you depth. And at the most, if it gives you another starter, that raises the quality of your pass blocking to protect your now starting quarterback that you drafted in the first round last season. And now you got guys that are saying, hey, we got this guy behind us and he's not going anywhere. Or at the very least, you're also saying, hey, we also got this first round pick running back that we got behind us, and we're going to make his job easier too, which, by the way, makes the quarterback's job easier by association. So all of that comes around.
And all of this also connects back to, the defensive presence that they're talking about when they force turnovers. If they can establish an offensive line that just bullies people down the field, once you force a turnover and then you force that defense to get back out there, say the Steelers are able to ground and pound somebody, they can just run the ball. They're punishing a team, and then their defense gets a turnover. And now that defense who's tired doesn't get the rest of a full drive, and then you get your offense back out there, and your offensive line continues to punish guys. That's how you wear teams down, and that's one of the better ways, I think, that you attack teams like Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, Josh Allen and the Bills, Joe Burrow and the Bengals. I think this is all part of the Omar Khan, Andy Weidl, Mike Tomlin plan to build the Steelers towards attacking this new age of NFL offenses and team construction, where these offenses are superpower. They have all these great talents on them, and everyone thinks they're unstoppable until someone stops them. And then you see that everyone's wondering, wow, how did the Eagles get to the Super Bowl when they're doing that? How did the Bengals not win it all? Those types of things. Heck, you look back at the Chiefs. Yes, Patrick Mahomes was amazing in their run, but that defense stepped up in several big ways for them. Chris Jones playing a huge role in how the Chiefs, as well as the young secondary that they put together. So
very opportunistic secondary.
And a very opportunistic secondary, as well as was the Eagles secondary that got them. They're the 2 Super Bowl teams, mind you. So I'm right.
The league in turnovers force was Philly.
Exactly. All of this, and again, this segment was about Herbig, but I think Herbig, it's going to be interesting. Also, I want to point out there, yes, this Nate Herbig is related to the Nick Herbig, who is a defensive lineman / edge rusher, I believe, out of Wisconsin. So, yes, the Steelers could draft another Herbig and then have another pair of brothers on their roster. Great. That's all what we need is more brother memes on the Steelers. But in all seriousness, I think this is showing the commitment that you're seeing to get bigger guys. And, Josh, if this keys anything else to me, I still think that they need to go after a corner early. But it keys off to me that they want to improve up front. They want to get meaner Naft, and they want to fit this bill that we've been talking about, an opportunistic defense with a strong, sturdy offense that pounds you and then takes advantage of that. This, to me, does signify that I think offensive linemen will come in reinforcements through the NFL draft in the early rounds, something that Steelers fans have been begging for some time now.
Can I do it? Can I
sure,
run it down again? Can I do it?
Do it.
Chris, it sounds... everything that we've talked about already, it sounds like they're sticking to the thing that we've been talking about for what, a year and a half now, Chris?
A year and a half. This was the model to get out of the Ben Roethlisberger era, to get into the new era. Whoever their quarterback was going to be, it ended up being Kenny Pickett. You and I have been saying it on this show and elsewhere about this plan to get the Steelers forward.
Playing adequate defense.
Yes.
Running the football and winning the turnover battle, because it continues. Here's the thing. It's not like we're making this up, Chris. It's not like this is something that they're shooting for. They've been doing this. They've been doing this for a while now. If I remember correctly, I think it's 35, 27, and 1 now in the last 3 seasons, or since week 3 of 2019. This is what's been happening. They've been doing this now. That record, when they actually give up 20 points or less, and win have an even or positive turnover margin. And now running the football, which we haven't seen this team do consistently in half a decade, because I've been saying this for a while. Le'Veon Bell walked out the door, Todd Haley walked out the door, and the run game went with it. Well, now this past season, it came back. Now you're adding that back to the equation. So all of this now is moving in that direction. And not only did they do that in order to win 9 games last season to match the win total of the previous season with an 18-year veteran quarterback, and they did it last year with a rookie quarterback. I don't know why people don't see that part. But now it allows you to amplify that and put you in an even better position with the quarterback who is now a seasoned veteran. You have an offensive line that is now fortified. You've got skill guys that have played together a little bit. You got a second-year wide receiver who's going to emerge into you hope to continue to emerge into just an absolute weapon, a tight end that you hope to continue to emerge into an absolute weapon. And I'd love to see them add one more guy like him. Another pass-catching tight end would not hurt this offense. But I'm keeping my fingers crossed for it. So just to add to that too. So all of that is now moving in the direction of, like I said before, it's no longer the thing you're relying upon, but it's still something that you use to help you win football games, because now you don't have to do it all with your offense. If there's a day when you can run the ball and win, fine, run the ball and win. If there's a day you got to rely on Kenny Pickett and George Pickens and Deontay Johnson and whoever else, and you hope Calvin Austin III is healthy enough to do this with Pat Freiermuth, and you got to rely on that offense to help you score to win games, you can do that. If you have a defense that's forcing turnovers and you hold a team to 6 or 7 points, or maybe even 10 or less, maybe it's a 20-9 game to win games, you can have that too. You don't have to win games the same way all the time. Now there's different ways to win football games because everybody wants it to be a certain way. Here's where I drop my obligatory wire quote, to quote Marlo Stanfield. You want it to be one way, but it's the other way.
The other way.
It's the other way. This is that thing that we're talking about here, because everybody's like, oh, why didn't the offense throw the ball more? Because the running game was getting the job done for you. Because they were clearly trying to keep their quarterback from getting exposed, because once again, he had already been concussed twice. So you got to try to limit that exposure, limit that risk. And the best way to do that is run the football. Keep the third down distances short, because now you can convert them better. And if you're converting them better, that means you're holding on to the ball longer. If you're holding on to the ball longer, that means you probably got a better chance of getting into scoring territory or getting into scoring position to, at the very least, as long as your drive is ending with a kick, you're probably doing okay, regardless of what that kick is. Do you want to score 18 points with field goals? No, but they won a playoff game once. It's not one of those things where you can just pick and choose how you want to win. You got to win the best way you can. You got to get it how you live. And if your defense can help you do that by limiting teams, if your offensive line can help you by strengthening your running game, and if you can be a team that limits its turnovers like the Steelers did last year and gets more opportunistic like the Steelers started doing at the beginning of the season and then started doing toward the end of the season, while their turnovers or offense were going down and their turnovers or defense were going up, you're going to win football games more often than not, because historically speaking, the best way you can try to win a game without having to use your offense or without having to put too much on your quarterback, if you can run the football, and you can play good defense and win the turnover margin, now your offense is in a better position to finish teams off. And that's exactly what you want. Everything doesn't have to be a 30-plus point scoring output to win games by a touchdown or two. It's not going to be that way every week. But if you can win games by being responsible with the football, which, by the way, other great coaches other than Mike Tomlin have talked about. Pete Carroll that's been one of his bedrocks. It's been one of Belichick's bedrocks. You got to enforce that.
I agree, Josh. We got to move on because we got to get to the next segment. But I want to ask you about what they need to do next in free agency, because the linebacker position still remains unaddressed. We'll talk about that in just a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, we got to talk to you guys about the Ultimate Pro Football GM game that you can download and play right onto your phone. I love this game. It's been a lot of fun. I've even started to replay it again. If you've ever dreamed about being an NFL GM and being the person that makes the free agents hires, this is your chance. This is a game where you take on the franchise, become the GM, create the team name, where they're from, the team colors, build the stadium, build the scouting resources, and build out the franchise the way you see fit. You hire the coaches, you fire the coaches, you can hire the sports psychologist, you can draft your quarterback, trade whoever you want to trade, make all the moves, and play through seasons. Your goal is to play a 25 season run as a GM, and a season can go as fast as 5 minutes when you're playing the game, as long as you're simulating it through. It's a lot of fun to play. I won 19 championships in 25 seasons when I was a GM. If you think you can do better, download the Ultimate Football GM game right now. It's free that you can download it right to your phone, and you can even play it offline. And when you do that, just go to ultimate-gm.com. That's ultimate-gm.com, or just look it up in the app stores. Again, that's ultimate-gm.com. And Locked On Steelers listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise by using the promo code Locked On in the game store. That gives you more stats, more resources, and more everything to get more points in the game and build your dynasty today. So again, download the game at ultimate-gm.com or look it up in your app store. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Hey everybody, Chris Carter here again, just with another editor's note. Of course, with the Larry Ogunjobi move, like I said, kind of jumbled up the show and how we were doing it. We had a linebacker discussion, so here's our linebacker discussion. I will note that at one point you will kind of hear me react and be like, whoop, they signed Larry Ogunjobi. We got to redo some things here. So please take note of that in the show as you listen to our discussion on the Steelers not signing a linebacker as of our time recording the show and what they need to do with the remaining linebackers available in the free agency class as well as the NFL draft. The Steelers do have some concerns here, and it's still the linebacker position because all they have right now under contract is Myles Jack and Mark Robinson. And Myles Jack, I think, is fine. He did a decent job last year. I think he could do better. Mark Robinson, long way to go. I think everyone's excited about the hard hits he can deliver and the enthusiasm he brings, but they need a seasoned veteran, and they maybe even need a good linebacker from this draft class. And there aren't that many good linebackers in this draft class, in my opinion. But everyone's talking about free agency right now, and more guys are flying off the board. The guy I thought would be a really good fit for the Steelers was the 49ers linebacker Azeez Al-Shair. He signed with the Titans. Kyzir White is now off the board as well. And the room to sign somebody is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. There still are people out there, though. There's Leighton Vander, the Cowboys linebacker, who the Steelers liked coming out of Boise State back when he was drafted in 2018. There's also Drew Tranquill, a former Notre Dame guy who was a fourth-round pick for the Chargers out of 2019. He had over 100 tackles last year for the Chargers, and he looked like a guy who could be part of an answer there to fill at the linebacker position. But here's my thing, Josh. It's like these are guys that seem they're going to be holding down the fort. The Steelers went to Clemson's pro day where Mike Tomlin got an up close look at guys like Brian Brzee, the defensive lineman, but also Trenton Simpson, who looked super explosive with a 40.5-inch vertical. It makes me wonder, what is the linebacker plan for the Steelers? Because we're talking about all these turnovers that they're looking to generate with the secondary, but their linebackers, their off-ball linebackers, they gave them 0 turnovers last year. I was trying to say that in a better way, but they gave them 0 turnovers, and I think that contributed to things. But if you can stuff the run and cover well, just don't get exposed over the middle, I think that's what you're mainly asking for the Steelers linebacker in this defense. Do you see a move coming soon where they're going to sign one of these veteran linebackers to kind of fill that spot and not just bring back Robert? I think Robert Spillane still will come back and be a veteran down the line in their depth chart, but they need a legitimate, solidified starter with experience next to Myles Jack, unless they go and get a Trenton Simpson, a Drew Sanders, a Jack Campbell in the 2nd or 3rd round of the NFL draft.
Drew Sanders. That's always going to be something that perks my ears up because
you're an Arkansas guy.
He's a Razorback. I mean, you give me a Razorback, I'm a happy boy. But all things aside, to be serious about it, I expect, and this has been my hope going into the offseason. I have always hoped that the answer would be sign a guy and then draft a guy. That was my hope at corner. That was my hope at offensive line, and that was my hope at linebacker, because those were 3 places that I thought they needed, A, a veteran to help raise the level of play, and then B, a rookie to help build depth and probably become the guy in the future that replaces the veteran that you brought in to raise the level of play. I have not changed from that. I was still on that. Leighton Vander Esch is a name that I am interested in. Remember they were interested in too. There's a little voice in the back of my mind. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't heard his name moved yet, but then again, I've been talking to students for a lot of the day, and I heard some of these moves after I came out. So I don't know if Quan Alexander has been locked up yet.
I don't believe he has. I believe that he's still a free agent. Just scrolling through here.
I don't think I heard his name called yet, but he's someone that kind of sits in the back of my mind.
I believe he is still a free agent. Yes. I know that he's dealt with a lot of injuries, as has Leighton Vander Esch. That's the other thing here, is that these are guys who have dealt with injuries in their career, and significant ones. Quan Alexander has dealt with, I think, some bigger ones than Vander Esch.
Yeah.
But that's also a concern to be taken here. Also, guys who I believe are still on the market, and these are just other names, not saying the Steelers are going to definitely target them. Deion Jones, who was originally with the Falcons many years ago.
Yeah.
He was just with the Browns. He's out there right now. Devin Bush, of course, still available. I don't see that ever happening because it seemed like both parties
No.
were mutually happy to get away from each other in that situation. But then there's Denzel Perryman, Nicholas Moreau. Again, Kyzir White was signed. So there's some names out there, but again, the herd has thinned a lot now that Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards and guys like that have been signed. Josh, I agree. The sign and draft move is the move for the Steelers, but should there be an emphasis on guys who can cover more, or should this be an effort to try to get another run stuffer guy who helps with that and kind of leave Miles Jack to more of the coverage responsibilities because he wasn't all that good at that? Or should they go get a guy who specializes more in coverage?
I would probably like to see what they can do with a guy who's better in coverage. If you could take that part off of Miles Jack's plate, especially now that you see that this secondary is starting to be stacked with guys that are more man-to-man centric, because I don't think Patrick Peterson was just a numbers-related move. I think part of that was because he was such a reliable guy in man coverage, and it looks like that's going that way, especially if it's a Terrell Austin-led defense. It's going to be an emphasis on man-to-man. I would prefer them to have a guy that could be a little bit more useful in coverage. I want to see a guy that can move in space, and not only move in space for coverage sake, but also moving sideline to sideline that can help with the running game too. But you need somebody that can cover ground quickly, because the last guy they had that could cover ground quickly as a linebacker, he was done 6 years ago. And that's a long time to have to wait for your defense to get another guy that can work in space so well, that can move so fluidly and have that kind of speed and instincts and athleticism. So I would probably lean more towards coverage. Not that I don't think they need to have a run stuffer guy, because I think
hold up. I gotta say this. I gotta say this. The Steelers have retained Larry Ogunjobi, 3-year deal, $28.75 million. So that is a big move.
Wow.
That solidifies the defensive line now next to Cam Hayward. So I'd take that out of the rotation there. So we've been talking about a few things here. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for checking out the Locked On Steelers podcast. Again, very sorry for how things were a little bit more broken up this time. I hope you were still able to enjoy the show. Again, I'm your host, Chris Carter. Thanks again to Josh Taylor for jumping on with us and working with us in this show today. It was great to have him on and get all his insights. Remember, Josh Taylor at Josh Taylor HD if you want to get his takes on Twitter. You can also listen to him on 93.7 The Fan. You can also watch him on KDKA TV, the CBS station in Pittsburgh. You can also find me, Chris Carter, on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. You can also read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette at post-gazette.com. You can also listen to me right here or watch me right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast that you can download on any podcasting app that you listen to, or watch me on YouTube with the Locked On Steelers podcast. Like this episode if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. Thanks again for checking out Locked On Steelers. I'll be back tomorrow with more craziness as what's going down in the free agency. We'll see you then.